Heavy rain poured down outside a private chapel in Lagos. Black umbrellas filled the entrance like dark flowers opening in the storm. Expensive cars lined the street. Security guards stood stiff by the gate. Inside that chapel, the air felt heavy, thick with perfume and quiet gossip. Chief Chinedu Okoye was gone. Oil investor, property mogul, philanthropist. A man people feared, respected, and needed. In business, his name opened doors. In the family, his word was final. And now, his casket rested at the front of the room, covered in white lilies. Amara stood a little distance away from everyone else. No one stood beside her. No one held her hand. She wore black, simple and plain, while others dressed like they were attending a society wedding. She kept her face calm, but her chest felt tight. This was her father, the only parent who ever truly understood her silence. Across the room, Sarah, polished, composed, almost glowing, accepted condolences like a movie widow. She dabbed her eyes gently, hugged guests gracefully, and nodded like she was already in control of everything. Cameras flashed outside. Important men shook her hand with respect. Behind Amara, whispers moved like smoke. Everything belongs to Toby now. The son takes over. She was distant anyway. Amara didn't react, but she felt it deep in her bones. Something wasn't right. Her father was many things. Careful, strategic, protective, and he would never leave her unprotected. A few days later, the family gathered in a luxury conference room overlooking Victoria Island. The walls were glass from floor to ceiling, showing the ocean in the distance and the busy streets below. Everything about the room screamed power. Polished marble table, leather chairs, chilled air conditioning, quiet assistants moving around with bottled water. Outside the building, cameras were waiting. Bloggers, business reporters, even a few live streamers. When a man like Chinedu Okoye dies, people don't just mourn. They watch. They calculate. Inside, nearly 30 relatives filled the seats. Uncles who suddenly looked important. Cousins whispering behind designer sunglasses. Business partners sitting stiff and silent. Toby sat close to the head of the table, confident, almost relaxed, like someone who already knew the outcome. Amara chose a seat near the end, quiet, observing, her face calm but her mind alert. At exactly noon, the door opened and Barrister Adewale Sonni walked in with a briefcase. Conversations lowered to a murmur. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. But before the lawyer could even sit down, Sarah slowly stood up. She didn't rush. She adjusted her black blazer, smoothed her hair. Then she cleared her throat loudly enough to own the room. For clarity, she said, her voice steady and dramatic, Amara has been removed from the will. My husband made that decision before he passed. The words landed like a slap. Gasps filled the room. A cousin covered her mouth. Someone whispered, I knew it. Toby leaned back in his chair, trying to hide a small smile that still showed at the corner of his lips. All eyes turned to Amara. Some looked at her with pity, others with judgment, a few with quiet satisfaction. It felt like the walls had moved closer, like the air had changed. Amara didn't speak. She didn't argue. She didn't even blink. She simply folded her hands on the table and looked straight ahead, her expression unreadable. But inside her heart was pounding, not from fear, from certainty, because her father never made big decisions without telling her. And if Sarah was announcing this before the will was even read, then something bigger was coming. The room was still heavy from Sarah's first announcement, but she wasn't done. She stayed standing, one hand resting lightly on the table like she was about to deliver a speech at a charity gala. Her voice became softer, almost disappointed. The kind of tone that pretends to be kind while cutting deep. She abandoned this family, Sarah said. She walked away when her father needed unity the most. She doesn't deserve a single naira from his legacy. Few people nodded immediately. Others avoided eye contact, but no one challenged her. Toby didn't even try to hide it this time. He leaned back in his leather chair, arms folded, a slow smirk spreading across his face. Not shocked, not confused. Just satisfied, like everything was going exactly how he expected. From the other side of the table, a cousin leaned toward another and whispered, not quietly enough, "She must have disappointed him badly for him to cut her off like that." A small, sharp laugh followed. The words floated across the room and landed directly on Amara's chest. Disappointed him. They had no idea how many late nights she spent in her father's office discussing strategy. No idea how many board meetings she attended quietly in the background. No idea how many times her father called her privately just to ask, "What do you think?" But none of that mattered in this moment, because perception is louder than truth. All eyes were on her now, waiting. Waiting for her to break, waiting for tears, waiting for anger, waiting for a scene. But Amara did none of that. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She didn't cry. Her hands stayed folded calmly on the table. Her back remained straight, her face unreadable. The only sign that she was human at all was the slow, steady rise and fall of her breathing. Inside, her heart was beating hard, not from shame but from restraint. She could feel the humiliation being served publicly, intentionally, like this was part of the plan. This wasn't grief anymore. This was performance. Sarah wanted the room to believe a story before the truth had a chance to speak. Amara slowly shifted her gaze. Not to Sarah. Not to Toby. Not to the whispering relatives. She looked directly at the lawyer. Focused. Steady. Because in a room full of noise, the only voice that truly mattered hadn't spoken yet. The silence stretched for a few long seconds after the whispers faded. Then Barrister Adewale Sonni slowly adjusted his glasses. It was a small movement, but somehow it pulled the attention of the entire room. He placed his briefcase carefully on the polished table, unclipped the locks and looked up, not at Amara, not at Toby, but directly at Sarah. "Mrs. Okoye," he began calmly, his voice smooth and professional. "With respect, the will has not yet been read." The words were not loud. They were not dramatic, but they changed the temperature of the room instantly. The confident energy shifted. People straightened in their seats. A few exchanged confused looks. Toby's smirk slowly faded, just a little. Even the cousins who had been whispering went quiet. Sarah blinked once. Just once. Then she forced a small, controlled smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Yes, well," she said lightly, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. "Please proceed. It won't change anything." But something in her voice had changed. It was thinner now, tighter. The lawyer gave a polite nod, but his expression didn't move. He reached into his briefcase and removed a thick envelope sealed with red wax. On the front, in bold black letters, were the words, "Final revision, confidential." A soft murmur rolled across the table. "Final revision." Toby leaned forward now. Sarah's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her chair. Barrister Sonni broke the seal slowly, deliberately. The tearing sound felt louder than it should have. Every single person in the room was watching his hands. Amara didn't move, but inside something clicked. Her father was many things: strategic, patient, careful. He never played checkers when he could play chess. The lawyer pulled out several documents, neatly clipped together. He flipped through the first page, scanning it briefly as if confirming something. Then he cleared his throat. Not loudly, just enough. "In accordance with the final instructions of Chief Chinedu Okoye," he began, his voice steady and official, "this document supersedes all prior versions of his will." Supersedes. The word echoed quietly. Sarah's smile froze. For the first time since the meeting began, uncertainty flashed across her face. And Amara felt it. A shift. The moment when a room full of people realizes the story they believed might not be the real one. No one whispered now. No one smirked. The only sound left was the soft turning of paper, and the beginning of the truth finally stepping into the room. Barrister Sonni adjusted the papers in his hand and began to read. His voice was calm, clear, unshaken. "To my beloved daughter Amara." The words hit the room like a sudden clap of thunder. Everything froze. For a second it felt like even the air stopped moving. Chairs stopped creaking. No one whispered. No one breathed too loudly. Amara didn't move, but her fingers tightened slightly against the table. Beloved daughter. Not distant daughter. Not former daughter. Not disowned. Beloved. Across the table, Sarah's smile cracked. It was small but visible. The polished expression she had been wearing all morning slipped just enough for the truth to show through. Her eyes flicked quickly toward the lawyer, then toward Toby, like she was trying to calculate something in real time. Toby's jaw tightened. The lawyer continued reading. In recent weeks, I have been made aware of certain rumors suggesting that my daughter, Amara, has been removed from my will. Let this serve as my official and undeniable clarification. Those claims are false. A low murmur exploded across the room. False. People looked at each other, confused. A cousin who had laughed earlier now stared down at the table. One of the business partners slowly leaned back in his chair, watching carefully. The lawyer didn't pause. These rumors were not accidental, he read. They were deliberately spread. This time the reaction was louder. Someone actually gasped. Sarah's posture stiffened. Her hands, which had been resting gracefully in her lap, slowly curled into fists. She forced herself to remain seated, but the confidence she walked in with was gone. Completely gone. Amara felt something rise in her chest. Not anger. Relief. 'Cause she knew it. She knew her father would never cut her off without speaking to her. She knew he wasn't careless with his decisions. He was precise. Protective. Strategic. The lawyer turned the page. My daughter has stood beside me in more ways than most of you will ever know, he continued reading. Her silence has often been mistaken for absence. That was your mistake. The room was no longer whispering. It was listening, fully. The same relatives who had judged her minutes ago now avoided looking in her direction. And Amara didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply sat there, steady and composed, as her father's voice, written in ink, defended her in front of everyone who tried to erase her. And for the first time since the funeral, she felt it clearly. The truth was no longer coming. It had arrived. The room was already shaken, but Barrister Sonny wasn't finished. He adjusted the next page and continued reading, his voice steady and formal. In addition to the personal allocations outlined above, he said, I have placed the majority controlling shares of my conglomerate into a private trust. That got everyone's attention. Not the houses, not the cars, not the cash, the company, the empire. Every business partner in the room leaned forward at the same time. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was power. The lawyer continued. The primary beneficiary of this trust is my daughter, Amara Okoye. Silence. Real silence. It felt like the ocean outside the glass walls had gone still. Toby blinked. Once. Like he hadn't heard correctly. Sarah's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Barrister Sonny did not slow down. This transfer of majority controlling shares becomes effective immediately upon the reading of this will. Immediately. Not next month. Not after review. Not after approval. Immediately. A chair scraped loudly against the floor as one uncle shifted in shock. Someone muttered, "That's impossible." A business partner pulled out his phone discreetly, already calculating what this meant. Amara felt her heartbeat in her ears. Majority controlling shares. That wasn't just money. That was authority. That meant board decisions. Company direction. Final signatures. That meant the empire. The lawyer turned another page. To my son Toby, he read, your inheritance will be released in structured portions over time, provided you meet the performance and conduct conditions outlined in Appendix C. Conditional. The word hung in the air like smoke. Toby's face changed completely now. The confidence was gone. The smirk had disappeared. His jaw tightened so hard it looked painful. And to my wife Sarah, the lawyer continued, your administrative control over company operations was always temporary. That authority expires today. Expires today. It felt like the floor shifted under the entire room. Sarah finally spoke, her voice sharp. There must be some mistake. But the lawyer calmly held up the signed document. There is no mistake, Mrs. Okoye. This is the final revision. Properly signed. Properly witnessed. All eyes slowly turned toward Amara. She hadn't moved. She hadn't reacted dramatically. She simply sat there, breathing steadily, as the truth rearranged the entire room around her. Minutes ago, she was the daughter who had been cut off. Now, she was the majority shareholder, effective immediately. Just when it felt like the room couldn't take another shock, Barrister Sonny closed the file gently and looked up. "There is one final instruction from Chief Okoye," he said. The room went still again. He requested that a recorded video message be played immediately after the reading of this section. A staff member quickly rolled in a large screen. The lights in the conference room were dimmed. The ocean view behind the glass walls faded into reflection. Amara's heart started pounding harder now. The screen flickered. And then, her father appeared. Chief Chinedu Okoye sat behind his office desk, wearing one of his simple white traditional outfits. He looked a little thinner than before, a little more tired. But his eyes were the same. Dark, strong, certain. The entire room leaned forward. He looked directly into the camera. And then he spoke. "If anyone tells you I abandoned you, they are lying." The words cut through the air like a blade. Amara's breath caught in her throat. On screen, her father continued, calm but firm. "I have watched carefully in my final months. Have observed tension, manipulation, conversations that stopped when I entered a room." A quiet ripple of discomfort moved across the conference table. "I may have been ill," he said, "but I was not blind." Sarah's face slowly drained of color. Her confident posture collapsed inch by inch. Her hands gripped the edge of the table now, knuckles pale. She wasn't blinking anymore. Chief Okoye continued, "Amara, you have always understood my silence. And I have always understood yours. If you are watching this, it means certain people believed they could control the story after I was gone." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I protected you in ways you did not always see," he said. "And I have protected this company from those who mistook proximity for loyalty." The room felt smaller now, tighter. Amara felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She kept her head high, watching her father speak directly to her, defending her even in death. "And to those who attempted to manipulate my final days," he said slowly, his gaze steady, "I was always 10 steps ahead." The screen went black. No music, no dramatic ending, just silence. And in that silence, Sarah looked like someone who had just realized the game she thought she won had been recorded the entire time. The screen faded to black, but the shock hadn't ended. Barrister Sonny cleared his throat again, pulling everyone's attention back to the table. "There is one additional clause," he said carefully, "inserted in the final revision." You could feel the tension rise again. "In the event that any beneficiary publicly misrepresents the contents of this will before its official reading," he continued, "their allocated share will be reduced by a predetermined percentage, as outlined in this document." It took a second for the words to sink in. Publicly misrepresents. Before its official reading. Slowly, very slowly, every single head in the room turned toward Sarah. The lawyer didn't hesitate. "This clause applies immediately," a cousin whispered. "Oh my God." Barrister Sonny adjusted the page and read the numbers clearly. Sarah's inheritance, which had already been limited, was now reduced dramatically. Properties reassigned. Dividend access restricted. Voting influence minimized. It wasn't a small cut. It was a serious one. The room exploded into whispers. She announced it before he even started reading. "That counts, doesn't it?" She said. Amara was removed. Toby looked stunned. Completely stunned. His earlier confidence had vanished. He looked at his mother like he was seeing her differently for the first time. Sarah tried to speak. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice wasn't strong anymore. It was shaky. "I was clarifying." "With respect," the lawyer interrupted gently, "your statement was recorded. Multiple witnesses are present, and media was outside the building at the time." Recorded. That word hit harder than anything else. Sarah's shoulders dropped slightly. Just slightly. But enough for everyone to see. Moments ago, she had walked into the room controlling the narrative, confident, certain, publicly declaring Amara erased. Now, her own words had cost her millions. The same relatives who had nodded along with her earlier were now leaning away from her, creating space. No one wanted to be too close to the mistake. Amara didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The truth had done what she never had to. It exposed the attempt at control. And it reduced it, dramatically, in front of everyone. The whispers were still moving around the room when Amara finally moved. She pushed her chair back slowly and stood up. Not in anger. Not in drama. Just calm. Steady. Controlled. The sound of the chair sliding against the marble floor echoed louder than it should have. Conversations faded immediately. Every single person in that conference room turned toward her. Minutes ago, they were staring at her with pity. Now they were staring at her with something else. Amara adjusted the sleeve of her black blazer and looked across the table. Her eyes stopped on Sarah, not with hatred, not with revenge, just clarity. Her voice when she spoke was soft, but it carried. You tried to erase me before the reading even started. No shouting. No insults. No shaking. Just truth. The words hung in the air heavier than any scream could have. Sarah opened her mouth slightly, but nothing came out. For the first time since the funeral, she had no speech prepared. No dramatic performance. No control. Amara didn't wait for a response. She turned her gaze toward Barrister Sonny. Professional. Focused. When does the board meeting begin? She asked. That was it. Not how much did I inherit. Not what happens to them. Not did you all doubt me. The board meeting. Business. Authority. The shift in the room was instant. One of the business partners straightened his tie quickly. Another reached for his phone, probably to inform someone downstairs. The reality hit everyone at the same time. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was leadership changing hands. Effective immediately. Toby looked down at the table. The earlier smirk was gone, replaced by something heavier. Realization. The cousins who whispered about her disappointing. Her father now couldn't even look at her. Their eyes dropped the moment she glanced in their direction. Respect had returned. But it wasn't loud. It was quiet. Careful. Almost afraid. Amara picked up her bag calmly. Her heartbeat was still strong, but her face didn't show it. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need applause. The power shift had already happened, and everyone in that room felt it. Without raising her voice, she had just taken her seat at the top. The final scene was quiet in a way that felt powerful. Amara sat in her father's executive chair at the company headquarters in Lagos. The office was large and polished, glass walls showing the city skyline in the distance. Her father's old desk was still there, the same one where he had made decisions that shaped entire industries. Now she occupied the seat, not as a visitor, not as a replacement, as the rightful leader. Outside the office door, Sarah waited for a scheduled appointment. No dramatic entrance, no public speeches, just a formal meeting request like any other executive would receive. The same woman who once announced that Amara had been cut off from the family legacy now stood patiently, understanding the new reality. The irony was clear. While Sarah waited, messages began arriving on Amara's phone. Congratulatory notes. Short messages from relatives who only days ago had doubted her. The same people who whispered that she had disappointed her father now wrote polite words about strength and legacy. Proud of you. You deserve this. Your father would be happy. Amara read the messages without rushing. She didn't respond immediately. She placed the phone face down on the desk and looked out the window. The city moved below. Cars, businesses, people chasing their own futures. Life continued. A quiet voiceover filled the moment. She thought she could rewrite my father's legacy. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It simply stated the truth. Legacy is not erased by rumors. It is protected by decisions. Amara turned slightly in the chair, facing the room that now belonged to her responsibility. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't mocking anyone. She was simply present, strong, steady. The voiceover continued. She tried to cut me from the will. She forgot. I was written into the foundation. That was the final line. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Foundation. Because true power wasn't just about inheritance. It was about belonging. And Amara had always belonged to the story, even when others tried to rewrite it.
Thanks for watching.